understanding the flow of cash through your business and the timing of cash. And that allows the business owner to be able to effectively look forward and plan and make decisions on future jobs, have that discipline to be able to sit there every week and be able to look through the WIP report and the cash flow report, understand the cash flow so you can make those decisions on the next following week on what you're going to pay. I've seen a lot left on the table as well where maybe they should have charged for it because maybe it was a change where they didn't, so they absorbed that cost and they didn't get any revenue associated with that. So I'll just take a little bit here and just to get through this one period, and then all of a sudden it becomes the norm and you're losing percentage points that is turns out to be a lot of money. When you talk about giving discounts on AR, 2% discount you think isn't a lot, but ultimately when you annualize that, that ends up being over 30%. So if there's immediate pain points, and most times the immediate falls around cash flow, let's make sure that we have visibility into the cash of the business. Allow the bookkeeper to do what they're successful in, and then we layer on top of that individual. We provide them the support they need and direction to start driving some of these other areas.
Welcome everybody to the next episode of the Mobilization Mindset. My name is Scott Peper, CEO and founder of Mobilization Funding. And today we are going to be talking about accounting, finance, financial reporting, bookkeeping, tax, and all the differences in between. Think about it like this. When you're looking at your business and you're nervous about the numbers, what numbers do you look at? When should you look at them? What's the frequency? How do you even set it up? What is that financial infrastructure that I always like to talk about? Today, we have the perfect guest to walk through all of that. Someone who's founded their own accounting practice, sold it, owned a business in that capacity, and has helped many, many customers everywhere in between. Jason Kruger, welcome.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So now you are a partner, and I want to make sure I'm saying this correct. You are a partner at Citrin Cooperman, which is a firm.
That's right. Yep.
You founded your own company prior to that and have now joined or bought or sold your business to a much bigger company. But we're going to talk through all aspects of that, which I think is great because an entrepreneur talking to much other entrepreneurs in the space is always going to be a good correlation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about, specifically the construction industry. As you mentioned, I've had a lot of experience, obviously, in finance and accounting, and worked with hundreds of different companies in that space. But at the same time, I put my entrepreneurial hat on, so I definitely understand the pain and suffering that entrepreneurs and business owners face when they're growing a business, and so obviously applied a lot of the same practices to my own business to be able to position ourselves to be able to exit and join a larger firm like we did.
Yeah. And I think one of the things too about our audience is you're going to have a lot of project managers, leaders of construction companies, subcontractors, and general contractors. And I think getting an understanding, especially for the general contractor community, of how a subcontractor has to operate, the pain points of it, of course they all know, but really the financial pain points of it and what they have to go through in order to manage it. I think there's a big disconnect sometimes between what your average general contractor, project manager, or leader and a general contractor knows and understands about the types of margins that subcontractors are working with, or the cash flow type issues. What really paid when paid or even paid when delayed has an impact on them. And I think having somebody like yourself walk through that and explain how really great businesses with great people doing the right thing can look bad in many ways when just from dealing with the realities of construction management.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think, in construction really, and all businesses, it starts with cash flow, right? And so understanding the flow of cash through your business, and the timing of cash, and that allows the business owner to be able to effectively look forward and plan and make decisions on future jobs, on capacity, on um, timing of events, those types of things. And then the next is obviously, the WIP report. Everybody knows what the WIP report is. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of, accounting softwares are able to produce, from what I've seen, actually produce a very good WIP report. And at the same time, even if it does, you have to have good information to be able to produce that in the first place. And so the WIP report, I call it like the Holy Grail or the Bible of your business in construction, because it really gives you a snapshot of, okay, each job listed, how am I doing in each job? What's my progress? Am I meeting my expectations on overall costs and revenue and billings and so on? That helps me also to manage my cash flows and when my cash might be coming in. And so those two pieces, the cash flow and understanding the WIP report, is critical. And then the WIP then flows directly into the overall financial statements. And so what I see a lot of times with business owners in this space is that you look at the P&L or income statement, and it looks like, 1 month they're doing awesome, and the next month they've lost a lot, and the next month it's fluctuating all over the place. And that's because they're not really, in most cases, the accounting is being accounted for maybe on a cash basis, or they're not matching, the revenues and expenses in the right periods. And so it really makes it very difficult to analyze the financial information to truly determine how good you're doing. And if you're doing it the right way, you want to see that consistency from month to month and period to period, so that you can really say, okay, what truly are my margins? So that if I have a baseline, now I know what I can do to maybe improve upon them. And so that's ultimately, the direction that we want to go.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a second. I always think it's interesting. Like you think of like an income statement and a balance sheet, and I need these financials because I got to get them to my bonding company, or I need to get them to my
Mhm.
bank or a lender, or I need them to try to get new financing. But one of the things I don't hear a lot of commercial subcontractors saying is, I need my reports because it's how I'm going to make all my decisions this week. Or I need some reports because I'm going to be managing these several problems and I want to make sure I'm working my way around them. I think too often, especially contractors just starting out, they don't know what reports they should have, and more importantly, what those reports, the kind of information it should give to them, so the types of decisions they could make or ways they could avoid problems that happen all the time. Maybe touch on that a little bit and how you've come to, over the years, really mold that in for your clients.
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of like construction owners, business owners. A lot of them are entrepreneurs, right? They started in the construction space. They were very successful working for another firm or with another firm. They decided to leverage their experience, their relationships, their expertise to start their own firm. But they don't have and it's not anything negative, but they just haven't gotten the experience of, truly running and operating a business and what that exactly means. They're really good at what they do from a operational perspective, but at the same time, when you run a business or you own a business, there's these other aspects that are critical to ultimate, long-term success. And so when I talk to business owners, I like to say, know all aspects of your business. Know not just how to, build a house, but know how, understand the finance and accounting, understand the importance of HR, understand, sales and marketing aspect of your business. And you don't have to be the expert in doing every single one of these things, but educating yourself so that you can speak to them. And instead of what I see a lot of times is, owners of a business or construction, in construction specifically, they'll say, well, I'll start a company and I'll just hire a bookkeeper and they'll do their thing. And then I'll hire someone over here and they'll do their thing. Or I'll hire a bookkeeper and they'll do everything, right? HR, bookkeeping, who knows whatever else. And that may work for a while, but as the company grows, they start feeling the pain points. And if you truly want to build a business that is able to scale and grow, um, you have to build the right infrastructure to support that. And that starts with, the topic we're talking about, which is solid financial foundation, to be able to truly understand your numbers and be able to produce good numbers on a consistent basis. And that eliminates you from having to experience, the pain points and the starts and stops and the frustrations in the future if you set that foundation now. And so, as you mentioned, the critical reports are, obviously the balance sheet, the P&L or income statement, and the WIP report, which ties into both of those, the balance sheet and the income statement. But understanding those reports are critical from a historical perspective. And then, as I mentioned, having consistency and understanding the cash flows of your business at a minimum monthly, be able to look out 3 months in advance. But sometimes I even like to say weekly, have consistency on, okay, what does my cash look like? Have that discipline to be able to sit there every week and be able to look through, the WIP report and the cash flow report, understand the cash flow so you can make those decisions on the next following week on what you're going to pay, how you're able to manage the business effectively for that following week. And so those reports will all tie together in how you ultimately operate your business moving forward. Whereas a lot of times, business owners, they look at it as a necessary evil of, well, I got to put it together, like you said, because I need bonding or I need a bank financing or I need to do my taxes. Um, if you're managing your business effectively, you may not need that bank financing because you're able to manage the cash flows of your business effectively without it. So some of those things come into play as well.
So let's talk about this. What type of problems and pain points show up? Like, so if someone's listening to this, like, yeah, I do get these reports and I look at them, but maybe
Hmm.
I don't have the right foundational future. I don't have the right foundation in place for me to manage my future. So
Yeah.
what kind of problems show up? What kind of pain points are that they be experiencing to know, oh, this is where I got to address it?
Yeah. Well, the first thing, obviously, the immediate is the cash flow, right? The stress of, am I going to make payroll? The crossing your fingers and hoping for the best is, we talked about this before we jumped on the resilience of, construction and business owners. They always seem to make it, or, almost always seem to make it, but there's considerable stress, in their lives because of, hoping for the best, which we don't want to do. So the cash flows and be able to manage that, and just think if you had that visibility 3 months out as to what your projected cash flows would look like, and you're consistently updating that every week. That helps you to sleep better at night, helps you to be able to make decisions on, should I hire this employee? Should I not hire this employee? Should I take on this job or should I not take on this job? The other is on existing jobs, as we talked about, having confidence in your project reporting or your WIP report, so that lays out each job and having the understanding of, and most construction owners do a good job of on the bidding process. So they should have a good understanding of the cost of that job and what that should look like, but then being able to track and manage that. So if you're not, if you bid it out and then you just go and do it, you're kind of at the whim of whatever your team does, right? If you're, especially if they're longer projects, let's say it's a 6 month project or a year project, if you're able to consistently look at the progress and how you're doing and how your costs are against what you budgeted on a consistent basis, you're able to quickly pivot and make decisions if you're going off track. I've seen a lot of construction owners where they just go and they do the project, and at the end of the day, they look back and they say, were we profitable or were we not? There's a lot of areas where along the way, you can pivot and make decisions to improve or to pick up extra change orders or something to pick up some additional revenue or margin, inch by inch along the way through better knowledge of the information, and then ultimately allows you to communicate more effectively with your clients, or whoever your customer or client might be. And so that, I've seen a lot left on the table as well, where maybe they should have charged for it because maybe it was a change where they didn't. So they absorbed that cost and they didn't get any revenue associated with that. So that automatically dings the overall profitability on that job. And when you're talking about construction, subcontractors, especially as we talked about, margin is critical. So we want to track that margin to the percentage point. And anything, any 1 or 2 percentage points increase that we can get is critical. And if you're I mean, even if you're a $10 million construction firm, if you're able to impact, or improve your margin by 1%, that's 100 grand that drops straight to the bottom line or goes back into your business for an additional employee or growth or whatever it might be. So really understanding that those margins to the percentage point are critical.
Do you think not understanding those margins is the biggest gap you see when you start working with clients initially?
Yeah, yeah, that and as I mentioned, just the flow of cash.
Flow of
It's
cash.
definitely understanding the margins on a job by job basis. And then a lot of times they'll look at, it's they'll get monthly financials and it's more so on a cash basis, meaning they're not matching the expenses that were incurred in the period to the revenue they earned. So their margins look like one month they might be super profitable, the next month they might not because they're not lining up those costs and expenses in the right periods. So it basically makes their monthly or their income statement or their monthly financials, looking at it from a trend level, kind of worthless. Maybe from a quarterly or maybe from an annual perspective, it might kind of even out over time.
Mhm.
But monthly, I mean, it's like you can't really do a lot when you're in that position.
Yeah, I think what I would add to that we see a lot when we're analyzing companies for their projects and building out their cash flows and looking at the where the company's at prior to this project that we might help them with is we see them stay in that state too long. So like they
Mhm.
know they're in that state and they're operating in that state. They may not know what's going on exactly or how to get out of it. But the biggest problem they have is they actually stay in it too long, sometimes years operating that way,
Yeah.
which creates massive anxiety, tons of stress, and you
Yep.
don't even know where you're leaking profit or margin. And it really then just becomes an exercise of, I just need this next project so I can keep the cash moving and survive and not
Yep.
thrive, and it's like, you should be able to, if you know how to do good work and you're doing it well and you're actually finishing jobs, you are not just a commodity. That's not normal. Like there's plenty of places in construction right now that are not finding adequate work or people to do
Hmm.
the work. And so if you're someone who can finish the work, get a contract, do execute it and finish it, you could and should be doing that profitably because people need, it's not like we have an excess of construction workers.
Yep. Yeah, and they need good, solid contractors or to do the work. I mean, it's for people that are not in the industry, sometimes there's like there can be a lack of faith and or they're putting a lot of faith in who they hire and the good ones that build that reputation are in very, very high demand. And I think the good ones that the reputation of being solid, they have their ducks in a row, not only in how they deliver for their customers, but also the back office and their understanding of their business as well. And so it's that discipline all throughout your business, that financial discipline, the discipline in how you service your customers that really separates the top-notch, firms from, everybody else.
So thinking of those clients and they get in that 1 week now where they're short cash and they either start calling the people that owe them money to get paid sooner, and sometimes they discount what they're owed to take advantage of getting paid quicker. That's a form of lending. They may not realize it, but they're actually, it's a cost, there's a cost, a significant cost to that. Or they actually take out a loan. Maybe
Mhm.
there's some type of debt, and maybe it's the wrong type of debt or whatever. What I guess the reason why I'm trying to ask you is, can you explain how once you do get into a cash constraint, those next decisions you make to bring cash in, whether it's new debt or whether it's paying your receivables earlier at a discount, what type of impact have you seen that have long term on businesses?
Yeah, what I've seen, unless there's a significant discipline and a plan to pay that debt off. I've seen, business owners in general and in the construction space, once you get in that cycle and it's tough to get out, right? And so now all of a sudden you're carrying debt all the time, right? And maybe you thought, oh, I'll just I'll just take a little bit here and just to get through this one period, and then all of a sudden it becomes the norm, and you're losing, percentage points that is, turns out to be a lot of money, right? I mean, when you talk about giving discounts on AR, 2% discount you think isn't a lot, but ultimately when you annualize that, that ends up being over 30% interest rate. And so because you're giving 2% on a 30-day loan or something like that, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that's significant. And when you're dealing with percentage points, I mean, we want to focus on where your business is today, and we want to improve those percentage points. And so that becomes a cycle of without financial discipline that makes it very challenging to get out of. And so, what I would say is, if you are in that situation, one, you have to have good financials to to as a starting point to understand your business financially. You may want to make sure we understand our cash flows and our what our future cash flows look like. And then we need to start making a plan over a period of time to get that paid down or paid off, or start extending or limiting the number of discounts that we're giving to our customers for early payment, those types of things. Because ultimately, we want a healthy business that is producing the right profitability and industry. Any percentage point you give, you end up doing a lot of work and you're not getting the rewards that you deserve from it.
Yeah. So let's think tactically now for a second. We've talked about some of these problems. Someone comes to you, whether it's now at your firm or in the past, and they say, "All right, I need help." You get a lay of the land, you go through all the things we've just discussed. Where do you start making the first steps, the first initial moves? Like, how do you help them?
Yeah. So the first thing I ask for is I say, let me see your current financials, right? Want to understand what systems they're using. So to understand what the capabilities are of the financials that they have. And, I want to understand, I always look at it from, understanding them, their business, what are their goals? What are they trying to accomplish? Where did they come from? Where do they hope to go? That impacts how, the decisions you make in your business. Want to understand their current and immediate pain points. So in other words, if they say, shoot, I don't know if I'm going to make payroll next week. Well, okay, well, we better focus on that, right? Or let's make sure we have a plan for that. So what are your immediate pain points? And then what are your or goals, and what are your long-term pain points or goals that we want to alleviate over a period of time? So if there's immediate pain points, and most times the immediate comes, falls around cash flow, let's make sure that we have visibility into the cash of the business. And so there's an easy, we try to simplify it. We have an easy 13-week cash flow model that we can build out. The expenses are pretty straightforward. The cash inflows can be a little bit more challenging, but if we work on it and we have discipline and we start looking forward, we can do that. And then we can start to plan and prioritize, our outgoing payments to make sure that, okay, we're going to make payroll. We feel good about that. I know I'm going to get this cash in at this point in time. Okay, great. I'll use that for this. And so that's, number one is how do I how do I get handle on the cash flows of my business? And then the second is, when we start working with a company is now that we have at least visibility and I can sleep at night knowing that I'll have enough cash this month to continue to run my business. It's let me see your current financials. What do they look like? And now let's start digging into your business. And so that involves the types of projects you have, how profitable you are on those projects. It also involves understanding your overall G&A or other general administrative costs associated with your business, right? Do you have this massive facility that you're renting, but it's only half, you only using half of it? Are you planning to grow into that? What's the plan, right? You may be spending a lot of additional costs in areas that are just pure expenses to the business that are not providing value to the business. So understanding the expense structure and aligning that with your goals. If you're saying, hey, we've signed like these massive projects, we're going to grow into this space over the next 3 to 6 months, great. But if you're planning, if you just want it for show, well, that's money you could also have in your pocket too. So what's more important, right? And so understanding the overall G&A expense structure of your business, and how that relates to the overall financial health of your business is important. But then ultimately, we want to get to a point where, as I mentioned before, we have a process to close the books every month by a specific date where you're getting solid monthly reporting. Each month lines up appropriately. So, as a business as a whole, you can see the margins associated with the different types of services or work that you're doing. Hopefully, you're breaking it down by, whatever type of work that you're doing. If you have different service lines or different types of things that you're doing, we want to break that apart so you understand the margins of each. And then that's at a high level, and then a granular level, that's where that WIP reporting comes into play, which is I want to be able to look at each of my jobs and at a minimum on a monthly basis say, okay, uh, how am I doing on each job? And that's where we have the discipline to sit down with the superintendent, the project managers, whoever it might be, whoever's working on those jobs, give them the visibility to say, hey, here's how you are doing on this job. We're going off track. Why? How can we rectify that? Should we be charging more than we are? What's the bidding process look like? And you can then make decisions based on the success or failures of jobs, how you bid, or how you take on new jobs in the future. And so all of those things come into play in just getting that good information up front to be able to make those decisions that ultimately will drive, more profitability to the business.
Mhm. Yeah, I think what you just described is something I like to call like the quick reaction force, to use a military term. A lot of times people are in this mess and they hire an accountant, and the accountant just says, "Can you send me all of your bank statements?" And they want to
Mhm.
compile reports.
Yeah, yeah.
What they really need is what you just described, like getting in and figuring out the cash flow, getting in and
Mhm.
figuring out what's the pain point. How do I build a report around that? Like a lay of the land, I like to call it. Basically, what you just described in the last 4 minutes is everything that a good construction accountant needs in order to
Yeah,
actually give you good construction accounting. They're not
right,
typically the company that can do what you just described at all,
right.
in my opinion.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like I said, the firm will hire a bookkeeper, and the bookkeeper is good at you know, invoicing and tracking expenses and but they don't most bookkeepers do not have the sophistication to truly drive the process like I described.
Hmm.
And so, that's to be honest, that's where we've been very successful is um, allow the bookkeeper to do what they're successful in, and then we layer on top of that individual. We provide them the support they need and direction to start driving some of these other areas. And then we provide the leadership to be able to sit down with the business owners and talk through their business, their cash flows, ask questions to help make sure that they're able to make the right decisions as they move forward.
Yeah, and it's not just that's not just the role of a CFO either. It's really a construction focused CFO. I
Correct.
tell everybody so often, I say what I've noticed about construction companies is you can have the most sophisticated CFO, COO, but if they don't specifically know construction, your lawyer is not a construction lawyer. Your accountant is not a construction accountant. You will suffer greatly. And I hate seeing good companies, good people even, especially that are trying to do the right thing, and they hire an accountant or they hire a CFO and they just didn't know. And so that's why
Yeah.
it's so important to have these kind of conversations. And I appreciate the way you're sharing it, because it's true. If you don't know what you're doing in the order you're doing it, then you need help. But if you don't get the
Mhm.
right help, you can oftentimes be in a worse situation, or oftentimes someone's been paid and then I feel
Mhm.
like, well, I hired a CFO and they didn't do anything for me. And so
Yeah.
the delineation between these things that you're talking about is so critical for a construction company, owner, business leader to understand, that you
Mhm.
really have to get it from someone who knows what they're talking about in construction, period.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and the challenge in the construction space, it is so specific. And to be honest, there's not a lot of resources out there that have this knowledge, at that let's call it CFO level or strong controller level, because most construction firms don't have, where do they come from? Where do they
Right.
get that experience? And so, you're kind of stuck with just hiring kind of who you get. And the challenge, I think, is too that it's a lot of it is the luck of the draw, because the person doing the hiring doesn't have the experience in finance and accounting. So kind of trusting that hopefully this person knows what they're doing. And so then it can be, rolling the dice. I'm fortunate that one of my colleagues that I work very close with, who leads our construction practice, is the best I've ever seen at, understanding and driving things forward in this space. The reason, because he grew up in a construction family. He spent his whole life doing it. He worked out in the field. He
Mhm.
played every role within, the construction space. Even started his career, not in accounting and finance, but out in the field, and ultimately then got his degree in finance accounting. Worked his way up, became a controller for what ultimately was a 200 or $300 million construction firm. And so he's seen every aspect of that. And so he is phenomenal at relating to, hey, I don't just know the numbers. I know what your guy out in the field's doing. I know what, the guy over here is doing. And I, can really understand the challenges that you're going through. And someone like that is critical to the success of a business.
Yeah. Staying on that topic, but modifying, switching gears a little bit. With the advent now of artificial intelligence and AI tools and new technology and the speed at which it's learning and access, anyone can access it. How do you see that changing or being incorporated into construction businesses such that it could start to maybe help them a little faster or better? Are there any
Yeah,
tools now?
construction is interesting. A lot of times it's still more of a blue. It's obviously a blue collar or trade. I mean, AI is not going to help you hammer nail in per se. But what we've seen a lot in on the success of understanding the success of what's happening in your business. Um, there is the first thing that we can leverage is with different accounting systems, or what we call ERP systems, like a Sage Intact is, can be popular for construction, or some of the Sage products. They're starting to implement more AI related AI related uh, activities or aspects within their software. And so what it does is we can create a lot more efficiencies in the mundane work, in how we do things from a day-to-day perspective, that allows us to now say, okay, now that we have this information, now that we've done this, now how do we analyze this information? And so we're getting to a point where, over time, and my goal, or what my hope is over time, is that it will really allow us to truly analyze in a deeper way the success of our past jobs, so to allow us to understand, what worked, what didn't work, where are the failures. It'll allow us to analyze job by job comparisons, to identify where maybe uh, some of the anomalies might have been in those jobs, as to why some were successful and why some were not. But the reality is we're kind of beholden to the technology of the systems that we're using. There are ways to enhance or leverage, like a Microsoft Copilot. We do have a what we call a digital team that works with companies to be able to leverage tasks in the office and automate those tasks. Construction is a little bit more challenging from that perspective. I think we're still, a few years away, but the most of the technology that we're using is starting to embed AI to make it more efficient, for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think finding ways to take your current team of employees and staff and finding ways to enable them to do things more efficiently they already do, whether they're in accounting or not, will create more
Yep.
time to allow them to think and not be so reactive. And then you could probably find some good tools after that, or just open up some freedom of time to give them the ability to do the things that they might not be doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So the podcast is called The Mobilization Mindset. So thinking through, many construction leaders think construction and accounting and it's the accounting of construction is more backwards looking thinking. How did I do, this year? What taxes do I need to owe? But and it's a necessity to their business. But what we've talked about today is that forward looking, the type of reports you can have, the way you can avoid problems, the way you can get yourself out of problems and navigate them. So thinking through that, what is the one mindset shift you would call on folks listening to this just to make one little shift in your mindset that could automatically or help them unlock the real value in having all this information and what they could have for them?
Yeah. Well, I do want to comment on the taxes. You say what taxes do I owe at the end of the year, right? Like
Mhm.
if you're forward looking, you actually have an understanding of what taxes you will owe throughout the year and then into next year so you can start to plan and you're not just caught up with, oh, you owe a couple hundred grand or more in taxes and oh, I don't have the cash, right?
Yeah.
And so that is, that's one reason to be looking forward into your business to say, hey, I need to account for, or I need to understand what my tax liability may be in the future so that I'm not stuck with a cash crunch when ultimately I have to pay it. So, that in and of itself is a critical item. But there's a couple things, and I think we've touched on them as well. But as you look forward in your business, one, what keeps you up at night? If you're a business owner, think about what keeps you up at night. And a lot of times it is, am I going to make payroll? Is this job going well? Shoot, I hope, we're profitable on this job. Those things can we can help you, or not we, but understanding your financial information can help you to sleep better at night, knowing that, hey, this job actually is not going great, but I know that now, and instead of waiting to the end, and I can make decisions to start to improve this job, in the first half of this job before, I find out it's too late at the end. Or now have visibility moving forward into what my cash flows look like so I can make the decisions to understand and ultimately prioritize the payments and the inflows of cash so I can ensure that I can operate my business more effectively. So having the financial discipline to not only look at get your historical financial information, but your historical then ultimately, if it's set up and it's positioned effectively in the right format, can be a predictor of your future financial information. So the foundation is understand your historical, take that and then say, okay, now that I have confidence in what my historical is, how do I improve these numbers? And now I can develop initiatives to improve that and measure that over time. So if I have an initiative to say, hey, I want to improve my margins by 1 or 2% this year, um, or maybe even more. Okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to do that? And how do I know if I'm actually successful? And so
Yeah.
that is the power of understanding your historical and then how it translates into your future to be able to measure the results of what you've done. And then ultimately, obviously, understanding cash flow is will help us all live longer without having to stress every night.
And that's the truth. No doubt. So Jason, how can people find you and Citrin Cooperman?
Yeah, so Citrin Cooperman is I think it's a top 15 firm nationally. We have a very strong construction practice among other industries as well. We're a full service firm, so tax, audit. I'm in the group. It's called, I'm in the outsourced accounting and advisory, CFO advisory group, which is my background and kind of, where I've spent most of my career. And really just love to talk to business owners. I can easily be found on LinkedIn. Jason Kruger, with Citrin Cooperman, obviously. Citrin with a C, Citrin. Happy if anyone wants to shoot me an email. I always like to talk to business owners. Email is the letter J Kruger, Kruger, @ citrincooperman.com. If I don't know the answer, I usually know someone that does. But really happy to talk to anyone that wants to reach out.
Well, Jason, I really appreciate it, man. And we'll put all your information too in the show notes. So anyone that's either listening to this or following it, if you go to wherever your favorite place to grab the podcast, you'll see it in the notes. You can also find this on our YouTube channel if you want to see Jason and I talking live. That'll be on there at Mobilization Funding. Of course, if you found any of this information valuable, please share it with somebody. Let us know. Follow Jason and I. Give us a like or share. Let people know what's out there and where they can access this information. Jason, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Really appreciate it.
You got it. All right, everybody. Have a great week and may God bless you.